So our next presentation is from Dr. Helena Popovic. Helen is a GP and best-selling author of In Search of My Father and Can Adventure Prevent Dementia? And she's going to present today a personal perspective in search of my father. Thank you, Helena.
Once upon a time, we knew little about our brain. The idea that it could change was considered quite insane. That wrinkled lump of grey matter in our head just shrivelled and shrank until we were dead. Nothing could be further from the truth we now know, because researchers found that new brain cells can grow. We can get smarter and better with age. It's our beliefs about ourselves that have put us in a cage. It's never too late, and we're never too old, and it doesn't matter what we've previously been told. We can boost our brain and sharpen our mind. We've discovered that there is so much we can find. I've listened to what the researchers say to discover the secrets our brain has hidden away. And because of the amazing work you all do, my confidence in caring for Dad slowly grew. Discovered with Alzheimer's at age 75, he no longer wanted to be alive. He'd lost his wife and his ability to cope, and worst of all, he'd lost all hope. Had I not known of patient-centred care, I'd have felt quite helpless and sunk into despair. Putting into practice what I learned from you, Dad started feeling less despondent and blue. We ate lots of berries and leafy greens, and I stopped him eating sugar by any means. We danced and sang and went to the gym, and the neighbours started asking, what's come over him? We volunteered with Meals on Wheels, and I discovered that Dad inadvertently steals. It was just the dementia interfering with his mind, and over time he resumed being generous and kind. I encouraged his friends to keep visiting him. His favourite pastime was flirting with Kim. A growing sense of purpose fuelled his healing brain and allowed him to release long-standing disdain. So I thank you all from the depths of my heart. Without your achievements, I wouldn't have made a start. I would have given up before I began, and Dad would have been a very different man. 13 years ago, shortly after my mother passed away with lung cancer, I discovered a box of Exelon, rivastigmine, in the butter compartment of my parents' fridge. Rivastigmine is an anticholinesterase drug, which is sometimes prescribed in the early to mid stages of mild to moderate stages of Alzheimer's, because it slows down the breakdown of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and it may slow down worsening of symptoms. Now, I didn't know anyone who had dementia in the family, so I asked Dad if he knew anything about this. And he says to me, oh yeah, your mother said I should take these because they improve my memory. Between you and me, I don't think they do much good. But, you know, as long as I stuck one on after my shower every night, happy wife, peaceful life. That was how I first learned that my father had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I had mistaken his withdrawal, confusion and memory lapses as grief in response to having lost Mum. Such was the stigma around dementia in my Serbian family of origin that my parents hadn't even told their only child, their devoted daughter, who also happened to be a doctor, that her father had Alzheimer's. And I subsequently did, confirm that with his GP, that it wasn't just something being made up. In fact, Mum, who was a GP herself, hadn't even told Dad of his diagnosis because his mother had died with Alzheimer's, and he swore that he would throw himself off the gap, which is the cliffs at Watson's Bay in Sydney, should he ever be diagnosed with dementia. And she wasn't prepared to call his bluff. And quite frankly, when I learned all this, I wasn't prepared to either. So we did speak about his memory and the need to bolster his memory and confusion, but we never actually spoke about dementia, which is really, really sad. But as late as 2021, a US study of 150,000 people, men, it was actually mostly men with an average age of 75, found that a diagnosis of dementia within the preceding 2 years increased the risk of attempted suicide by 44%. And a diagnosis of MCI raised that attempted suicide risk by 73%. Why? Because even today, a lot of patients are still having the experience of diagnose and adios. Get your affairs in order, because there's nothing we can do and it's only going to get worse. This is such a needless tragedy, because all the things that reduce our risk of dementia and in fact could potentially stop MCI in its tracks, are synonymous with a more joyful, meaningful, socially connected life. And so began Dad and my adventure with dementia. I systematically worked my way through the Lancet list of 12 modifiable risk factors, which I'm sure you're all aware of, so I won't go through them. But 13 years ago, they did not exist. So I had to actually sift through the literature and find them for myself, which was actually a good thing, because I found even more things that we could do to boost his brain. So I'm just going to chat about a small sample of the things that we did. It goes without saying we did music and gardening and games and darts and quoits and jigsaw puzzles. And in fact, I found jigsaw puzzles particularly effective in improving his focus. And one day he came running into me excitedly and said, "Guess what? I finished that last jigsaw puzzle all by myself. And it took me less than 2 hours. And on the side of the box, it says 4 to 5 years. But the first really impactful thing we did was at the age of 80, I bought Dad his first ever gym membership. I did not buy that silver tracksuit. I have no idea where that came from. And very quickly I noticed that when we went to the gym, he was much less anxious and less of a pacer. Now, to be fair, he'd always been a bit of a nervous pacer throughout his life. And apparently when my mum was in labour with me, men were not allowed into the delivery suite. And he was pacing back and forth in front of the hospital, really anxious about the delivery of his newborn. And finally, a midwife came running out to him and she said, "Congratulations, your wife has given birth to a healthy baby girl." And Dad said, "Thank goodness it's a girl. At least she'll never have to go through what I just went through." So we did a combination of aerobic exercise, strength training, and balance exercises. And the reason we did that, well, firstly, aerobic exercise, I think it is the closest thing to a panacea that we have. It reduces inflammation, it repairs a damaged blood-brain barrier, it lowers blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, it stimulates the production of the neurotransmitter, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which is actually a fertiliser for brain cells. The literature on this is overwhelming, that high levels of BDF equate to better learning and memory. People with Alzheimer's have actual lower levels of BDNF in their brain, and BDF actually promotes synaptogenesis and neurogenesis. And of course, we all know that exercise improves mood. Every single one of these processes is occurring in Alzheimer's, and physical exercise reduces all of them. Dad's favourite, So basically my motto is movement is medicine. It's not a nice to have, it's an absolute essential if we want to maintain and even improve our brain function. And yesterday, if you were in the other room, we heard that just a year of regular moderate exercise can actually increase the size of the hippocampus by 3%. Now, Dad's favourite exercise was SIT, sprint interval training. Let me show you why. Everybody please stand up. And I'm just going to ask you for 20 seconds to run as fast as you can on the spot. At your own pace if you haven't exercised for a while. I'll count you down. It's only going to be 20 seconds, but it's going to feel like a lot longer. Ready, set, go. 20 seconds. That's 10. I told you it's going to feel long. 5 more. Well done. How good does that feel? Now we would do, if we did a sit, it would take 10 minutes for the whole routine, because we'd do 30 seconds really hard, then 2 minutes of just wandering around getting our breath back, then another 30 seconds. So 4 times 30 seconds, 4 times 2 minutes, 10 minutes. No one's got an excuse for not having 10 minutes in their life. Now, of course, you can't nobody can go that, not everyone can go that hard. We also did HIITs, which is high intensity interval training. So you go for longer sessions, not quite as intense. And in fact, one afternoon, a carer came to our house to take him out to a dance performance, and she said, "What have you been up to this morning to Dad?" And momentarily he confused sit and HIIT, and he said to her, "My daughter and I had a shit together." It took a lot of fast talking to get around that one. We also walked at every opportunity, and researchers found that if an over 65-year-old can walk 360 metres in under 6 minutes, that's 1 kilometre in 16 minutes, it dramatically reduces cardiovascular risk. What's good for the heart is good for the brain, and it increases life expectancy. Now, Dad, of course, wouldn't walk for no good reason, but very conveniently, there was a post box 400 metres from our home. So I told him that we had to go and post a letter to my loving partner every day. The dementia meant he didn't remember that we were posting a letter to my loving partner every day. And I'd say we'd have to get there within 6 minutes so we wouldn't miss the postman. And every day he'd say, "Why don't we just leave earlier so we don't have to rush?" But it was a win-win situation because he got the exercise and my partner Derek felt very loved. We also did strength training because weak hand grip strength is a predictor of cognitive decline. This blew my mind. The US Health and Retirement Study of 14,000 people over the age of 50 found that every 5 kilogram drop in grip strength was associated with an incremental decline in cognitive functioning. So it really is, strong muscles equate to a strong mind. And yeah, we did a variety of things. We went to the gym, but we could also do it at home. Can everybody stand up and raise their arms in the air, please? Okay, and now just squat down so that you're not sitting almost touching your chair. And we'll only hold this for 5 seconds. 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000. You'd hold for longer in the real world, but up again, down again, another 5. Now, we could do this. This is not hard. You don't have to have expensive gym equipment. That's strength training. So it was push-ups. We started against the wall. We worked our way down to the floor. Thank you very much. And again, whenever we work our muscles against resistance, they produce a cocktail of chemicals called myokines, which circulate through our blood and affect all our organs, including our brain, to keep them in optimal working order. And other simple things. Whenever we went shopping, Dad would push the trolley and carry the groceries. And I had to endure disgusting glares from all the fellow shoppers who thought I was a lazy, good-for-nothing daughter because I was making Dad do all the work. But it was just part of his brain-boosting routine. And the third exercise that we engaged in, I promise this is the last time I'm going to ask you to stand up, but can you stand up one more time? And raise 1 foot off the ground. Now, I'm not used to doing this in heels. And see if you can balance on one leg. And now that you've got your balance, close your eyes. Does that make it harder? Okay, now when you've got your balance with your eyes closed, subtract 49 from 621. Does that make it harder still? Great effort. All right, you can sit down now. Why do we do that? Because balance is controlled by the cerebellum, which also regulates our thoughts and emotions, and researchers found that improving balance can actually improve mental health, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and they're doing trials in neurodegenerative disorders. In my case study of one, I really felt that it did help him. And it was just so many meaningful activities that we could do throughout the day. And in fact, the goal is for a 75-year-old, 10 seconds, for a 65-year-old, 20 seconds, for a 55-year-old, 40 seconds. That's the goal on each side. The next really important thing I found was to look after his dental health because the bacteria causing gum disease called Porphyromonas gingivalis can actually travel to the brain and damage the hippocampus by producing 2 proteases, protein digesting enzymes called gingipains. And gingipains have actually been found in 99% of Alzheimer's brains and far fewer brains of people without Alzheimer's. Now, it's not that P. gingivalis is the only cause of Alzheimer's or the sole cause. I don't believe that at all, but I think it's a considerable contributing factor. And in fact, Melbourne researchers are trialling a vaccine against P. gingivalis and developing drugs to neutralise the damaging ginger pains. Unfortunately, Dad didn't have time to wait for Melbourne to get its act together and get that drug and the drugs and vaccines on the market. So we had to find a friendly female dentist. And when I discovered the delightful dentist, Erica, my new motto became dentists over drugs, because just going to see her picked him up. In fact, one time we'd just arrived and parked the car, and we were getting out of the car, and he said, "You've parked in the wrong spot." I said, "No, I haven't." And I showed him clearly where it said patient parking, and he said, "Exactly. You need to find somewhere that says impatient parking." Now, if there are any researchers here, I think a really important area of study is to find the brain's flirting centre, because I swear it is the last thing to go, and we need to work out what is going on in there. Probably the most critical thing we did was to actually quit sugar. And I know this is not going to make me very popular, but I have to say it. Soft drinks are a bullet to our brain. All sugary drinks, that was where we started. Cordials, fruit drinks, fruit juices, even things that call themselves purely natural. Sugar, the sugar molecule, sucrose, is made up of two monosaccharides, fructose and glucose. Why do I say that soft drinks are a bullet to our brain? Because they deliver a massive amount of sugar to our liver in a very short space of time, and this has dire metabolic consequences for our brain as well as our body. I think it's really important that we discuss why and look at how fructose and glucose are metabolised differently, because everyone goes, yeah, I know I shouldn't eat sugar, and they're worried about the calories and the fat. That's not the problem with sugar. It's only got 4 calories per gram, the same as proteins. The problem with sugar is the metabolic effects on our brain and body. So firstly, let's look at fructose metabolism. When brain cells metabolise, i.e. break down fructose, it actually reduces brain cell energy, ATP. It causes glucose hypometabolism. Guess what? That is a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. This then leads to a build-up of uric acid inside neurons, and in turn, intracellularly, uric acid is pro-inflammatory. That's another problem with Alzheimer's. It causes oxidative stress. It causes mitochondrial damage, and people with Alzheimer's have been found in their brains to have lower numbers of mitochondria and damaged mitochondria. They're misshapen. Mitochondria are the organelles inside our cells that produce the energy, that produce the ATP and do other things as well. And fructose leads to insulin resistance, which leads to type 2 diabetes, and leptin resistance. Now, leptin is the hormone of satiety. So if we are leptin resistant, we never feel full and we keep eating, and it tends to be the sugary, ultra-processed foods. Every single one of those things is happening in Alzheimer's disease. And from my reading of the literature, and there's an enormous amount on this, is that Alzheimer's could well be initiated by fructose, initiating mitochondrial damage, initiating glucose hypometabolism. And in fact, rats who are given high fructose meals perform worse in tests of memory and their navigation through mazes. And this is partially, but not entirely, mitigated by simultaneous administration of omega-3 fatty acids. But it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It doesn't mean we can have a sugar binge just because we had a big piece of salmon for dinner. Now, the second half of the sugar molecule is glucose, and you'll know that glucose is what provides all our cells, including our brain, with energy through mitochondrial respiration, producing ATP. However, excess glucose, we know, leads to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, visceral obesity, and we know that all these things are massive risk factors, like type 2 diabetes and visceral obesity both double the risk of dementia if we have them in midlife. But worse still, excess glucose can actually be converted to fructose and all the downstream damaging toxic effects of fructose. And the enzyme that converts glucose to fructose is enhanced in the presence of salt or alcohol, any one of these, dehydration or hypoxia. So it's accelerated in the presence of stroke, for instance, And if we have, the worst thing possibly we could have in terms of food for our brain is hot chips with lots of salt washed down with a beer, because that glucose is just going straight to fructose, is going straight to lowering brain cell energy. I know this sounds extreme, but it only sounds extreme because we have megalithic corporations marketing toxins as treats. And they're just going to keep pumping out that message that it's not that bad, that just go and exercise, work off the sugar. It's not about burning off the sugar, it's about what it's doing metabolically. And what does excess glucose mean? It means if one has cognitive issues, I think any amount of soft drinks, sugar, refined starches, ultra-processed food is too much once we've already got some brain compromise. And why are soft drinks at the top of my list? Because, as I said, they deliver the greatest amount of sugar in the shortest amount of time. And I think we need to start having conversations around soft drinks like we did around cigarettes. We didn't know the harms of soft drinks when they were first introduced, just like cigarettes. Can you remember that doctors used to advertise their favourite cigarettes? Now we know we've got to start having these conversations and at least giving people a choice. There is no safe level of soft drink consumption. If you change nothing in your life, the same exercise, the same food, but you added 1 can of 375ml can of a soft drink, by the end of a year, you would be 7 kilos heavier and it would all be visceral fat and 24% higher risk of type 2 diabetes. That's how damaging one soft drink a day is. So I believe we need to give people a choice, because a lot of people said to me, you're really mean, you're taking away pleasure by taking away sugar from Dad. No, taking away sugar does not take away pleasure. You know, I did my homework, I cooked fantastic food that he would still enjoy. He did not miss it, but I did it gradually. So we just need to start giving people choices, and it's perfectly, just like cigarettes, as long as people know the consequences. If you have sugar, there is a strong risk of increasing cognitive decline. If you quit sugar, it'll be hard at the beginning, but there is a good chance you'll stabilise or at least, improve the energy going to your cell, and it may improve your functioning. I just think we need to give people those choices. Unfortunately, when Dad was alive, I was still not aware of the work of a metabolic neurologist, Dr. Matthew Phillips, in New Zealand. I strongly recommend looking him up, because he published in 2021 his study in the Alzheimer's Research and Therapy Journal. It was a 12-week crossover trial of a modified ketogenic diet in patients hospitalised with Alzheimer's disease. He's so generous. He's got everything up there is for free. You can download all the recipes, all the dietary plans, and you can actually reproduce this and see if it made a difference. What he wanted to know was if a ketogenic diet, and I'll explain what that is in a moment, improved cognition, daily functioning and quality of life. Spoiler alert, it did. It absolutely did. And the reason is, what's a ketogenic diet? It's a diet in which we have very low carbohydrate diet, adequate protein, quite high fat diet, because the liver produces what are known as ketones or ketone bodies in response to low carb, low glucose and low insulin in our blood. And ketones act as an alternative fuel source for starving brain cells. Brain cells in Alzheimer's don't use glucose properly, but they're still able to use ketones. And in addition to that, ketones are actually neuroprotective. Ketones reduce inflammation, oxidative stress and amyloid. They actually help our mitochondria heal. And remember, damaged mitochondria is another hallmark of Alzheimer's. And ketones increase the production of BDNF, our favourite neurotransmitter, which is like that fertiliser for brain cells. And this is actually not new. The ketogenic diet has been used in the treatment of epilepsy, particularly drug-resistant epilepsy, for a century. In the 1920s, the ketogenic diet was introduced for epilepsy, and now it's used for a wide range of neurological diseases. And I don't know why we're not using it for dementia, just trialling it more. I just so hope that someone listening is going to start more studies on the ketogenic diet and Alzheimer's disease. I also wonder if Megan Mack is listening, I just wonder, because that ketogenic diet is particularly effective for childhood epilepsy, could it possibly make a difference in childhood dementia? I don't know, but I certainly think it's worth trying. So, what's the key to a long, happy, healthy life? That was a question I posed to Dad on his 87th birthday. And he answered, this is a man with dementia, he said, fill your life with people you can laugh with, cry with, play with, and complain with, whom you love and respect, and who love and respect you in return. And guess what? A 75-year Harvard study led by Dr. Robert Waldinger came to the exact same conclusion. They followed Harvard University graduates for 3/4 of a century, and they looked at everything: diet, exercise, alcohol, cigarettes, meditation, stressful job, career success. And the number one thing that predicted a long, happy, healthy life and halved our risk of dementia was good relationships. Connection, not isolation. Having a confidant and feeling part of a community. And I laughed at the thought of an 87-year-old man with dementia coming to the same conclusion, just intuitively knowing what it took Harvard researchers 75 years to find out. So we all possess those healing powers. A kind word, a reassuring smile, a gentle touch. They are healing powers that every single one of us possesses. And I must admit, I'm really lucky that I have such a wonderful man in my life. I have a man who is kind and caring, a man who loves kisses and cuddles, and I have a man who cooks and cleans. How amazing is that? Especially as I have a way of making sure these three men never meet. To conclude, I don't believe in making dire predictions about an impending tsunami of dementia, because it just gives people a sense of helplessness and futility. I don't think that dementia need not be the disaster that's splashed across media headlines. What if instead we decided to view dementia as a doorway to life-enhancing personal and global transformation? The Lancet report urges us to be ambitious about prevention. I believe we need to be just as ambitious about halting decline, even reversing decline, through education, not medication. Education that it's not going to be a quick fix. Education not to wait for the next big blockbuster drug, but education that it's about seeking a more joyful, meaningful, active, socially connected life. Is it a hard ask? Yes, but hard doesn't mean bad. Hard is the price we pay for a more meaningful life, for a greater appreciation of who we are and what we're capable of. That's why I wrote the book. You know, I think we all need to be more evangelical that adventure can prevent dementia. Not in every single instance, of course, but I think it can go a long way to preventing a lot of dementias. And when I say that, you know, the media jumps at me and says, aren't you just giving people false hope? No, there is no such thing as false hope. Hope is hope. It's a window of possibility, and it encourages people to try. We don't have all the answers yet, but we mustn't let what we don't know stop us from implementing what we do know. And as luck would have it, just giving things a go, having a try, attempting something new, stretching ourselves, just those things, that mental stimulation, any of those challenges actually bring about cognitive benefits. In dementia, more than any other disease, education is more powerful than medication. Our decisions are more powerful than our DNA, and people are more powerful than pills or IV or subcutaneous infusions. So I'll leave you with the wisdom of two great minds. Michelangelo said, the greatest risk a person can take is not to aim too high and miss, it's to aim too low and hit. And Abraham Lincoln taught, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So let's aim high and create a future and create, you know, a really stimulating and supportive physical, mental and social culture that builds a future filled with adventure rather than dementia.
Thank you so much for such an energetic and inspiring presentation. It's been a real theme of people taking on a challenge and really shaking things up, and it's fantastic to hear what you've been able to do. We've got a couple of questions from the audience. One, back to your slides about the ketogenic diet. Wondering, have you got any idea of the ketogenic diet against the Mediterranean diet? Is one more beneficial than the other, or do they work similarly?
They don't work similarly. I believe, and we heard about it yesterday from Helen Mack, the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, the MIND diet, they are all terrific at lowering the risk of getting dementia. But once somebody has dementia, those diets are not powerful enough. We need an alternative fuel source, and that's where the ketogenic diet stands in a class of its own, because it provides the brain with ketones, which are both energy and neuroprotective and healing for the mitochondria. So the Mediterranean MIND DASH diets are the before, so that you don't have to then end up doing a ketogenic diet later.
Thank you. We've got a question in the audience here, and then another one over there.
My wife's been doing keto for 30 years.
Yep.
I get the sugar thing. What about no sugar?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I get the sugar thing in like soft drinks and that, but
Yes.
what about no sugar and all that
What
sort of
about no
stuff?
sugar? The World Health Organization has just in the last month announced that artificial sweeteners, sugar substitutes are actually no better for our health. They're not going to lower your risk of cardiovascular disease or obesity. However, because they still stimulate insulin release and may in the long run lead to insulin resistance, and they also change our gut microbiome. So artificial sweeteners are not good for health. However, they're probably the lesser of the two evils. Okay, yes. And I'd go stevia or monk fruit.
I'm a pretty big lad. But I had 10 years of testosterone. Because I don't make it, I don't retain it.
Yep.
I understand the sugar thing, but what about all those B11 and the long names that you can't pronounce?
100% agree with you that ultra-processed foods are not food. It's an oxymoron. Ultra-processed foods are just toxins. I'm just giving... What I'm aiming for was the lowest hanging fruit. Sugar is something people can relate to. I mean, in an ideal world, we just get rid of ultra-processed food, but it's just not going to happen. So you have to slowly educate. But yes, emulsifiers change our gut microbiome. Emulsifiers lead to inflammation. So emulsifiers are probably bad. But I think emulsifiers, they are added to foods to stop fats and oils separating, so they maintain a good even texture and consistency. But all those numbers, really, we shouldn't be eating anything that we can't pronounce, read, that's a number. I mean, do they give MasterChef numbers to cook with? No. So, yeah, in an ideal world, we don't eat any of that artificial stuff. We cook everything from scratch from home. But not every... Look, I was lucky that I had such a supportive network that I could go and work part-time and spend half my life cooking for Dad and doing everything with Dad. I know not everyone has that luxury. So we have to just do the best we can and at least educate people as much as we can and at least get rid of some of the biggest offenders.
Thank you. We've got one more question here. There's one of you, I'm not sure if we'll have time, might have to be in the break, but...
Mine's really, really quick. Thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. Is there any chance you'd share your poem with us? It was brilliant.
Share my what, sorry?
Your poem.
Oh, yes.
It was brilliant. Thank you
I
so
will.
much.
I'll send it to the organisers and they can
Thank
send
you.
it to everyone.
All right, well, one more question from the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, for fitting me in. Helena, I'm a physiotherapist, so I absolutely loved your presentation. That was amazing. And I think it's more of a comment, but just what you found in terms of physical activity, social engagement and cognitive, it's the same in terms of frailty as well. So frailty is a big thing for people even without dementia in terms of risk of institutionalisation.
Yes.
And, so all of the same things apply, so completely agree. And also around falls, risk minimisation. So yeah, I'm just a big fan of your work and I think it's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So on that note, we might again thank Helena very much for a very exciting and energetic presentation.